All right. Okay. Hello. All right. Hello. Welcome to today's video where I'm going to be talking about some of the spiritual concepts that currently exist on our planet and how they might be childhood reasoning and gaslighting versus actual spirituality and things that actually help us. And again, I have been one who has tried to talk about these things, I think, for most of my career on YouTube and on the internet in general, because I feel like it is very important for us as people and as humans who want to feel better in this life and who want to find ways of being that work for us to acknowledge reality for how it is, even when it's not fun or magical or sparkly or as amazing as we would want it to be. Because when we acknowledge reality for how it actually is, we can find the most empowerment we have within it. When we are living with an idea and a fantasy and something that sounds really amazing and sounds really great and that we really wish was true, but it's not actually true, as good as it sounds and as much as we can convince ourselves that it's a thing and as much as we want to convince ourselves that it's a thing, it's not a thing. We can't make it real. And then this actually stops us from, like I say, being able to find actual solutions to our problems, to being able to find ways of being that actually make our lives better. And it inhibits our capacity to have joy and to have like true joy and truly good experiences, because we're living in an alternate reality and we're living in denial, and reality is always going to catch up with us. I think that is like the main thing that I want to share, and that is important for us to embrace as human beings, right? Is that reality is always going to catch up with us. So when we have an idea of how reality is that isn't in alignment with how reality actually is, and even when it seems like our perception of how reality is how reality actually is, eventually consequences are going to catch up with us. Eventually, effect is going to happen. That's going to show us that what we were seeing and what we were thinking and what we were hoping reality was isn't true. And in this, right, we're going to have pain and we're going to suffer and it's going to suck. And like I say, when we refuse to learn from that, when we keep trying to make our reality doesn't change. How the world actually is doesn't change. And the results that our actions are actually going to create in real reality don't change based on what we believe. What we actually get from the consequences of our actions doesn't change based on what we believe. We can believe all we want that if I go to the edge of a cliff and I flap my arms really hard, I'm going to fly like a bird. We can believe it with our whole heart. We can feel it in our bodies. We can do all of the mental gymnastic manifestation work in the world. And we can, like I say, visualize it and vision board it and do all of these things to the point where it's like we are fully convinced that if we go to the edge of a cliff and flap our arms really hard, that we will fly. If we actually go to the edge of the cliff and flap our arms really hard, we are going to fall. Because reality is not going to change for us. And this, again, is something that in our spirituality, self-help, and personal growth worlds, forever, I think, for as long as human beings have existed, we have hoped and wished and dreamed that this wasn't true. We have wanted God or the universe or whatever it is that we believe is the governing force behind what is happening here, to alter conditions, to alter reality in some way, to make it how we want it to be. And we have been primed by spirituality and self-help and personal growth to believe that when things don't go how we thought they were supposed to go, that it's either that reality is just not cooperating and we need to continue to push for what we believe and what we want harder, and that eventually the reality will, bend to our will. Or we've been trained to believe that on some level, when reality doesn't go how we thought we wanted it to go, that this is like a sign that we've done something wrong in creating that reality. So rather than saying, oh, I might have an incorrect view of how reality works, I might have an incorrect view of what should happen when I do this thing, or the power that I have, or whatever it is, we say, no, I'm doing the right things. I have the right idea. My perception of how reality should go is still correct. It's just that I did something wrong in the protocol, or I didn't follow it perfectly, or I didn't do exactly what the magical person said I should do, and that's the reason I didn't get the results that I wanted. Okay, so let's stop being hypothetical and talk more about what is real reality. So right now I'm working on the mystery school again. I'm working on the next curriculum, and I'm deep in a section about morality and how morality has been used as a weapon, essentially, for ever and ever and ever against human beings, to keep them doing things that are truly against their better outcome, that are like masochistic, really, because we all have this deep core imprinting from the very beginning of our lives that the world is because of us, that everything that happens to us is because of us on some level, that it was our behavior and our way of being or our fundamental nature that is the reason why we are in pain, or we are experiencing pleasure, or whatever it is that's happening to us is happening to us. And we've been conditioned from forever, because this was our first experience, that it's not reality that dictates outcome. It's not our action against, physics or the way that the world works, but rather it is other people approving or disapproving of us, approving or disapproving of our behavior, approving or disapproving of our natural way of being, that then leads to the results we get in life. Yeah? Because again, in our childhoods, that's exactly how the world would have come across to us. We did not know how to understand our own needs, how to understand our own wants, how to understand why we were in pain, or any of these things. We didn't know how to solve our own problems. We didn't understand growth. We didn't understand self-expression. There was so much about reality that was affecting us. Hunger, thirst, the need for expression, the need for growth, pain, pleasure, all of these things that we had no real awareness of. We didn't understand cause and effect the way that it actually is. And we were not experiencing cause and effect the way that it actually is. Rather, we had the middlemen of our caregivers or whatever authorities were in our reality, that were dictating the outcomes of our experience. We were not having a one-to-one relationship with reality. We were having a one-to-one relationship with our caregiver's perspective and our caregiver's understandings and our caregiver's access and our caregiver's everything. Their weaknesses, what they had and didn't have, what they knew and didn't know, what they approved of and didn't approve of. All of these things were then the reason why we experienced having what we needed, not having what we didn't want, being rescued, being taught. Everything that we experienced essentially came through the middleman of our caregivers. We had our bodies and those things that our caregivers couldn't necessarily stop or start from happening. But then, when we were sick or when we were hungry or whatever, the remedy to that all came through our caregivers and what they were capable of. Yes? So we learned right away from the very beginning. These beings that are taking care of me, from our perspective, had complete control over everything. As children, we did not understand that our caregivers were limited. We did not understand that they didn't have access to absolutely everything. We didn't understand that they didn't understand everything. We didn't understand that their perspective of how life wasn't necessarily true. All we knew was that these people held the keys to absolutely everything, and they knew absolutely everything. And therefore, if how I was behaving or what I was doing or any of these things didn't garner the response from them that we wanted or that we needed, if they didn't take our pain away, if they didn't give us pleasure, if they didn't whatever we needed in that moment, we perceived that that was because of us. If they were sad or if they were down or if they were incapable of caring for us on some level in some day, we perceived that to be because of us and our behavior. So some things that our caregivers did or didn't do towards us was because of our behavior. They approved of certain ways of being, they disapproved of certain other ways of being, they expected us to ask for things in this way or do things in that way. But there was this constant understanding that if I just did everything right, and if I was in alignment with what they wanted me to be, perfect provision was possible. That they could and would and should meet all of my needs, take care of all of my pain, give me everything that I need. That was the perception. And if they weren't doing that, the perception was, I'm doing something wrong, I'm failing, it's because of me. Yes? Or, I'm hopeless. If caregivers can't do it, if caregivers can't rescue me, if someone outside of me isn't going to solve this for me, I'm trapped forever. I can't do it myself. Because that was our perspective. And so when we understand that is how we first learned about the world. That every perfect provision is possible. Perfect love and perfect safety exist. And that perfect love and that perfect safety equals perfect provision. Perfect having what we want and having what we need. And that the only reason that perfect security would ever be broken is because we did something wrong. We did something bad. We didn't align with what we were supposed to do. Because that was our perspective. Everything that happens to me is because of me. It is because of my behavior. Caregivers are doing what they are or are not doing because of me. You can see where we got this idea that transcending pain is possible if we just do the right things and live the right way and are the right kind of person. And even if we look back all through time, because we live in a world where cause and effect is real, where we can do something and get an outcome that is desirable. And we can repeat that over and over and over again because there is a pattern and there is structure to how our universe works. you can see how we would then project this idea that everything around me, everything that happens to me for my whole life is because of me on some level. And if I can figure out the formula for how this world works, I can have perfect safety and perfect pleasure and perfect outcome forever. Right? We all, I think, are struggling with the trauma, like the universal trauma of realizing that perfect security safety net blanket that we had with our caregivers as children got broken. And from there we suffered. Right? Like I almost think of it as like the Garden of Eden metaphor. Like all of us have experienced being exiled from the Garden of Eden in the sense that we, for however long in our childhoods, experienced this caregiver, our caregivers, as being all-powerful, all-knowing, meeting all of our needs. And then pain started to happen. And we were exiled, right? From the perfect Garden of Eden where everything was amazing and God loved us. Caregiver loved us so much that we didn't suffer. And it was because we did something wrong, right? Like the knowledge of good and evil. Just the knowledge of the fact that we don't know everything and that we don't have complete control started to creep in. And I think a lot of us, again, right, like we use our spirituality to try to get back to that perfect safety that we perceived existed in the beginning of our lives. And then so much of spirituality, like I said, for all of human history, has been set up to tell us, right? If you follow this right religion, if you follow the right God, if you accept the right Savior, whatever it is, you will be abundantly blessed. You will get all the things that you need, either on earth or in the afterlife. Or we've been trained to believe that we may not be able to physically escape suffering and have, people we love pass away or sickness or all of these things. But if we do the right things and have the right mindsets and do the right meditations and have the right awakenings, that we will be liberated from experiencing suffering. And these are the two kind of spiritualities we're handed on this planet. That there's literal escape from suffering through law of attraction, through Jesus, through whatever. If you just follow the right thing, make the right choices, be the right kind of person, you will be rewarded by the universe, by God, by whatever, with a completely transcended experience. And that if you're not having that, it's a test, it's because you've done something wrong, it's debt from sin, or from the sinful nature of your being. But this is all the explanation for why bad and hard things happen. Because humans did something wrong, or humans are fundamentally flawed on some level. And it's our job to fix that about ourselves or be saved and humbled so that we can escape that. Or we're taught that it's all our perception. That if you can just have the right awakening, the right enlightenment, if you can get your perception clear, if you can transcend the normal, shitty human thing, that you can have a perfect experience of life where maybe in the physical world everything is still the same for you as it is for everyone else, but your experience of it is joyful. Your experience of it is detached. You just don't suffer the way everyone else does. So again, we're handed on both sides freedom from suffering. And it's either because you did all the right things or you were saved in some way. which sounds like what we need from parents, yeah? Or it's because you adjusted your mindset perfectly to where you just don't experience it anymore. So again, you are in complete control. Yeah? You just have to do the right disciplines and do the right meditations and follow the path until you are liberated from this human experience. So over and over and over again in the spirituality world, we're handed one of these two concepts. And they're painted and dressed up in all sorts of different ways. Right? We have Byron Katie, we have Law of Attraction, we have Christianity, we have Hinduism, we have Buddhism, all these different forms of spirituality that essentially are promising us the same thing. You can escape suffering if you do the right thing. And then with that, always comes the reason why you are suffering, and it is essentially your fault. Because again, so long as the answer is suffering, freedom from suffering is possible. So long as the answer is, if you just do the right things, you can be liberated from suffering. That then therefore has to mean, I mean, maybe it doesn't have to, but in pretty much all of these lineages, we will find that it does lead to, and here's what you're doing wrong, and here's how you are the cause of your own suffering. Here is why you are in pain, and it is your fault. Right? And again, that can sound empowering at first. Because if my pain is my fault, that means my pain is something I can fix. If I am the reason for my suffering, that means I can do something to fix it. And then everyone has their different explanation for why pain happens. Right? A fundamentally sinful nature that needs to be redeemed by a savior. Choosing to be sinful, choosing to go against the laws of reality, choosing to go against God, and that is why you suffer. Yeah? Making bad choices, doing the wrong things, being immoral. Or you did something wrong in a past life. You are being punished in this life for what you did in the last life. Or this is just karma, and this is just your soul learning what it needs to learn. You're being punished, but it's not really a punishment because it's all for your growth and it's all for making you better and to become who you're supposed to become. Or you have a fundamentally perfect nature that you're trying to return to by getting rid of all of the human things, all of the human perceptions, all of the human emotions, all of the human reactions, all of the human distractions, and it's all about purifying yourself and cleansing yourself and making yourself cleaner and better and more pure so that eventually you have pure sight and pure awareness, which is that nothing could ever go wrong. Okay? And again, right? It's kind of one of two tracks. It's either reality is perfect, just how it is, and the only reason we suffer is because of our perception of it. Having cancer, someone you love dying, all of these things, nothing is inherently painful about that. It's just your perception of that being a bad thing that makes you suffer, or that makes that painful. Or those things are only happening to you because you did something wrong, you did something bad, you're not manifesting properly. So you can see again, there's this constant narrative that if we just do the right things, if we just become the right person, we can experience liberation from our pain. And that it all, again, boils down to your pain is happening because of you on some level. It's karma, it's retribution, it's a lesson, it's because of an action you took. And again, if we go back and look at our childhood perspective, we can see that we are projecting onto the universe what we projected onto our caregivers. We can see that childhood trauma of, no, these people are perfect and they have perfect access and perfect understanding. And therefore, if they're rejecting me, if I'm doing something wrong, that is why I am being punished. And then we look at God and we say, it must be because I'm doing the wrong things. God is punishing me because I did the wrong things. Or I'm experiencing pain because I'm seeing things wrong. I'm doing things. It's still me. Over and over and over again, we are handed this childhood perception that is dressed up as mature spirituality. Because how many times have we heard someone say, I just don't have thoughts anymore. I don't suffer anymore because I see everything as perfect. And we thought, wow, that's like a really spiritually mature person. They are so transcended. They are so amazing and wise. And then we find out later that they're yelling at their assistant and they're like a mess in their real life. Yeah, and we find out later that they are embezzling money, or they're torturing people, or they're really, really mean to people, or they live in this alternate reality where if anything goes wrong, they blame everyone around them, but still claim to be transcended. And again, even if we don't see that, it's still really enticing for us to think that these people have actually transcended pain, and that they have gotten to a place where they intellectually understand reality so as being so perfect that it no longer hurts them when hurtful things happen. That they no longer perceive pain, essentially. And we don't think that through. Because in real reality, number one, if we stopped experiencing pain, and if we stopped having the recoil, right, the nope, this is wrong, this shouldn't be happening sensation to pain, we would die. That we need to have the whoa, this isn't right. When something painful is happening to us, in order for us to protect ourselves. It is not actually a very good idea to get to a place where we don't perceive pain as something to withdraw from. That's not healthy. But anyways, the point being, it can sound so mature and it can sound so reasonable when people say that they perceive reality as being perfect and that it's always on them to adjust their perception. Okay? And again, I do understand that in a lot of these teachings there is nuance. That teachers do say, you know, it can just be hard and things can be sad, and when I say that things are perfect, I mean like I experience my sadness as perfect and I experience these things as perfect. And it's like, okay, if we get into that much of the weeds, that's when, to me, we're getting into true spirituality. Okay? So this idea that perfect transcendence from pain, that if we just do the right things or get our mindsets right or whatever it is, that we can eventually get to a place where nothing hurts anymore, that, I believe, is childhood trauma and projection. I also believe that when spiritual teachers tell us that perfect freedom and perfect transcendence from pain is possible, we enter into a situation where gaslighting is really, really common. And I'm not saying they do it on purpose, and I'm not saying they even know that they're doing it. But when we tell people, okay, you're still suffering, you still have physical pain, You're still sad because of a breakup or because you lost somebody. You were objectively victimized in some way and hurt by that, and you're still in pain because of that. We turn that into well, then you're not doing your spiritual work enough. Or you deserved that, so you need to figure out what the lesson was. Or whatever it is. And that, I believe, number one, is just so damaging to the human being. Because again, right, a lot of these teachings will then not accept that being a victim is possible. And when we deny that reality, we are denying reality. Power imbalances will always exist on this planet. Children are absolutely victims to their parents, to their caregivers, to the authorities around them. They do not have the capacity to consent. They don't have the capacity to protect themselves and defend themselves. That is a victim situation. When someone can physically overpower someone else, they are absolutely victimizing that other person. We live in a world of victimization where people with money and power and control can absolutely dictate the outcomes of someone's life based on that person's capacity to go along with what the person in power wants. Like, we're starting to wake up to the idea that, like, a consent in a power dynamic where someone has control over someone's income or control over someone's legal situation, that person that is being controlled can't give clear consent to a request because there's a power imbalance. And so many of these teachings want to say, no, you are in complete control. No one can victimize you. If something bad happened to you, again, you are seeing yourself as a victim. And if we continue to live like that as human beings, all we're doing is propping up the power structure. We are not empowering people by telling them that everything in their life is because of them and they have complete control. What that does is that denies power structures that do exist, that denies power structures that are currently in our day-to-day life right now, exploiting people, hurting people, keeping people away from resources and access and the things that they need. And we are saying, nope, that doesn't exist because everyone has complete control over their own reality. Again, that's a fantasy. That's something we are saying, and I truly believe this. The people who teach that are not saying it for the people they are teaching. They are saying it for themselves. That is a selfishly motivated teaching. When we say that every individual has complete control over their own life and everything that happens to you is because of you, we say that for ourselves. We say that because we want to believe that we can have perfect control over our own experience to the point where we never have to experience pain again. We want to deny any place where we don't have control, because that is then admitting that chaos can happen and pain can happen and we can't stop it. Real spirituality does not deny reality. Real spirituality is not selfishly motivated to tell myself what I want to hear to the point where I will gaslight all of my followers when their experience doesn't match what I want it to be. Right? I've seen this so many times in the alternative health world, it's not even funny. So many people in the alternative health world preach that it is possible to heal anything. Any physical, any mental, any emotional problem. With the right diet, the right mindset, the right whatever natural remedy. And that means that for everyone that remedy doesn't work for, the teaching is then you did it wrong. You just didn't follow the protocol properly. You didn't follow it long enough. What did you do incorrectly? There's something wrong with you that it didn't work. And again, we're primed to believe that narrative. Because that's the childhood perspective we all got. Authority figure has all the answers. They're telling me the right thing. If I'm not getting what I want, it's because I'm doing something wrong. We have so many people out there in spirituality, personal growth, health, telling us this is the key. This is the key to your freedom. And anyone who isn't getting the results that I'm saying you should be able to get is failing. And people are making millions of dollars selling shit that does not work. And no one is catching it. Because we're all primed to believe I must have failed. It must be that I did something wrong. And then we do this in our spirituality too. And especially with spirituality where the results are so much less obvious a lot of the time than in like health, like either you did or you didn't heal. But in spirituality, it really can be like, well, did my mindset change? Like, am I having a different experience? And like we can convince ourselves that we don't have these emotions and we're not having these pains or whatever. And then our anger comes up and our sadness comes up or something bad happens. And we're, again, primed to believe that I am experiencing this pain because I did something wrong. I'm not transcended yet. I'm not illuminated yet. And then the spirituality world will come and tell you, you're right. Right? You're not enlightened. You still see things as being negative. You still believe in victim consciousness. You're clearly just not awake. You're not aware. You're not spiritual. You're not as enlightened as the rest of us, who are all working on becoming our higher selves, and I'm detached from all these things. And again, right, like I come at this as being someone who's been in the spirituality world for a long time, who's been told over and over and over again that I just don't get it and that I'm missing something and I'm just negative and I'm not seeing it. When in real reality, from my perspective anyways, all of these people who have been preaching liberation from suffering and detachment and all of these spiritual ideas of perfect manifestation and I have my perfect life and all of these things, I know them in real life. And what they're telling people on the internet is not what they're actually experiencing. I have private one-on-one sessions with a lot of these people. And what they're saying in real reality that they're experiencing in life is not how they're actually feeling. I have yet to actually meet someone who's living the transcended reality that we see on social media. And that's perpetuated in the self-help and personal growth world as being the transcended state we all should be able to get to if we do the right things. And what this all boils down to is that we never learn how to actually deal with the shitty things of life. We're constantly in a state of navel gazing and trying to fix ourselves and trying to improve ourselves and trying to find the right protocol, and we're jumping from religion to new age spirituality back to religion, thinking we found something new every time when really we're just repeating the same shit in a different way, and we're not seeing it because we're running from the realities of life instead of learning to deal with the realities of life. And so the fact that currently there's this huge trend towards, hey, it might not be that we're just like broken and fucked up and like need more Kundalini rising. It might be that we're doing things because we're traumatized. Well, holy, hey? Like, all of a sudden, a bunch of people understood their pain so much from just that one acknowledgement of reality. Right? Just broadening our perspective for 10 seconds from if I'm not experiencing bliss and joy and everything that I want in life, there's just something wrong with me. And I need to get rid of these bad parts and I need to transcend these lower aspects and I have to get rid of my childhood nature and blah, blah, blah. To just seeing like, oh, maybe I was traumatized. Maybe I didn't get my needs met. And maybe if I work on that trauma or work on getting those needs met, it's not that there's a bad part of me. It's just that this part wasn't getting its need met or it learned how to adapt to a shitty environment. And so many people are finding freedom with that. And it's like, yes! You see? Acknowledgement of real reality. You were a victim in your childhood. Shitty things happened to you. You adapted. This, everything that you're doing as a human being right here, right now, is your best adaptation. Right? And this is something, again, that I've been saying on my channel from the very beginning, that everyone was like, no, you're wrong. There is no bad part of you. There is no bad behavior. There's no such thing as self-sabotage. Everything is you trying to do the best you knew to do in the environment you were raised in. It's you trying to live up to expectation in the hope that this will get you your needs met. And most of us, again, if we look at what we believe spiritually, and we look at the experience we had as children, and how we perceived our caregivers, the spirituality we're most drawn to is the one that most closely matches our family of origin situation. Because that's what makes sense to us. It's not because it's more true or less true than anything else that exists. It's because it makes the most sense to us based on our experience. But again, like I say, the point is, we're looking to get back to that childhood fantasy of perfect, transcended experience through trying to fix and change ourselves. We are constantly being told by spirituality and self-help and personal growth that if you do the right things or you find the right God or you do the right sacrifices or whatever it is, that you will be blessed in this life or the next. That freedom from suffering is possible if you just fix yourself. And that is a childhood view of the world. Every time. No matter how mature or how dressed up or how amazing it might sound. That is the inner child speaking. Because in real reality, number one, not everything that happens is because of humans. Period. The universe is not human-centric. The earth that we live on is not human-centric. We have caused a lot of things. And we do cause a lot of things. But we are not the reason for everything. The earth existed for a very long time before we existed. And it is going to exist for a very long time after we no longer exist. And greater than that, the cosmos, all of reality outside of Earth, is not human-centric. We are not the reason existence is existing, and we are not the reason most things that are happening are happening. And that is a hard pill to swallow for us who want to project our consciousness onto everything. Right? Number 2, projecting human consciousness out onto the universe, assuming that the universe or whatever governs how everything functions is like humans. If you really think about how huge everything is, and how big everything is, and how long it's existed, and even if you consider how human consciousness has evolved, to project our own selves onto the cosmos at large, it starts to sound pretty silly. Right? That the universe is just based on our thoughts and our positive emotions because that's what our reality is? What? Everything that's been happening for like ever since the Big Bang, there were no humans to have an emotion. So how is anything happening? Do you see what I'm saying? We have to kind of break this down a little bit. Next thing, even smaller than that. Not everything that happens to you on this planet is because of you. The weather is not because of you. Sometimes someone comes and punches you in the face at the ATM because they were having a bad day and you just happened to be there. It wasn't because of you. You get sick and it wasn't because of you. Sometimes you were born sick or born with a chemical imbalance, and it has nothing to do with the choices that you made. Right? Like all of us were harmed in some way by our caregivers. And we can see that that harm is now part of our everyday life. So we are now having to clean up a mess we didn't make. It wasn't because of us. We can start to go back and look at our childhoods and see where our caregivers didn't give us the right food or couldn't meet our needs, and it had nothing to do with our behavior. It had nothing to do with us. Maybe they were just having a bad day that day. They didn't have money. They didn't have the awareness. It had nothing to do with us. They were trying to conform to what their caregivers told them to conform to. Everyone's just doing what they're doing, hoping that the people that are important to them will approve of them, thinking that if that happens, they will be relieved from suffering. So we're looking to be approved of by God. We're looking to be approved of by the universe. All of this human-centricness, all of this main character syndrome is causing us, again, to deny reality. That not everything is about us. Not everything is because of us. And therefore, we don't have control over everything that happens to us. And then the second thing is, emotions are always going to be a part of our experience here. Pain is always going to be a part of our experience here. Because perfection doesn't exist. Everything is too big. There is so much happening on this planet at any given time. For us to come up with perfect systems, or, right, like we don't have control over our biology and how we are evolving and how we're passing our genes down and all of these, like, we to the degree that we have gained control over the natural world, we have improved our lives quite a bit. But again, we're not anywhere near right now. Anyone living right now is never going to experience a utopia on this planet. Which means pain is always going to exist. And our emotions are always going to exist. Hopelessness, fear, anger, sadness, loss, grief. These things are always going to be a part of our reality. Sickness we can't control. Not getting what we want. These things are always going to be a part of our reality. And if we keep making it that these things mean we are fundamentally flawed, we are going to be continually dogs chasing our tails, never getting anywhere. Because that's not why we experience pain. You don't experience grief or sadness or anger or bad things because you aren't right. So again, right? It can be complicated because there is cause and effect. And we can do things on this planet that cause ourselves pain. And we can get to a point where we can learn from that and we can change. But that doesn't mean that you were wrong and bad and flawed before. That just means you were a human who didn't know before. And that's okay. Okay? And, again, sometimes certain emotions, certain outcomes, they're just a part of life. We're just going to experience them. And they don't mean anything about you other than you're a human who's alive having an experience that is sometimes shitty. And there is no transcending that. And there's no getting rid of that. And there's no getting to a place where that never happens again. To lesser and greater degrees, right? Like some of us have mental illness and we are just going to have it for the rest of our lives. And it's not because of anything we did, and there are going to be bad days and there are going to be bad months, and that's going to be reality. And spirituality that tells us that that can be changed if you just do the right things is blocking us from getting actual tools to deal with that. When we're chronically ill, when we're sad over a breakup, when we're not able to achieve our goals, whatever it is, we need actual tools for working through that. We don't need more gaslighting, and we don't need more denial of reality that those things shouldn't be happening if you were doing the right things. Real spirituality says, okay, how are you feeling? What are you experiencing? And how do we best support the you that actually exists right now? In my opinion, that's what real spirituality is. So when you're angry, the best thing we can do is not try to spiritualize it out of yourself, is not completely try and figure out how you caused it and what's wrong with you and all that stuff. It's to first acknowledge that you're angry. Make it okay that you're angry, and find a safe place to express that anger. Then you can start to work out, okay, well, was there a part of me playing into that, something I can learn, something I can change? Was some of that just out of my control and I have to accept that? But we actually deal with the thing. Sometimes you're going to be in a situation where you realize I'm sick and I didn't cause it. And I don't know how to make it better. And that's not my fault. And there's no spiritual remedy for it. And again, we grieve that. We get sad, we allow ourselves to be upset. And then rather than looking for the perfect solution, right, we balance that with like, okay, where is my power? Do I have any control over these conditions? Is there medication I can take? Is there something I can do with my diet? Yes. And we do what we can do. But we don't then consider ourselves failures when there's a limit to what we can do. And again, I think that part of this is when we blame ourselves and shame ourselves and say it's my fault that I didn't perfectly transcend. It's a coping mechanism. And that's why I say I think people who teach this are teaching it more for themselves than they are for their audience. It's a coping mechanism that helps us avoid having to go through the emotional process of realizing where we don't have complete control and where we can't fix everything and where some pain is inevitable and where some suffering is inevitable. It prevents us from having to look at some of the harsh realities of life. But in my experience and in my opinion, truly mature people can look at the harshness of reality and not deny it. They can make room for the sadness of it and the grief and the anger, and then they have a balanced perspective. Where do we have some power to make some changes? Because that's always going to be a part of this. Can we start to look at systems? Can we start to look at the injustices that are happening on this planet and where we can change them instead of spiritualizing it away? Instead of, it's your fault if you just change yourself, right? Like, instead of boiling it all down to the individual, we can look at systems. We can look at how we can start to adjust things on a global scale. We can look for how we can step out of certain systems. We look at where we do have some control and where we do have some power. And then we grieve and process and accept and learn to be with the rest of it that we don't. Right? That we come to an awareness of what we don't have control over right now, or what we might not ever have control over. And then we say, what can we reasonably do about that? In terms of comforting ourselves, in terms of being there for ourselves, in terms of expressing. We have a balanced perspective. We look for where our power is. We don't deny that. But we don't pretend that we have complete control or complete power, or that we can find the God or the universe or the teaching or whatever that gives us access to complete power. We stop blaming ourselves for everything. We stop going into self-help and personal growth and fixing myself every time we are in pain. We stop allowing spirituality and spiritual people to gaslight us with their tools that don't work, because they're telling us you should be transcended. And if you're not, it's because you're not doing it right. Real spirituality says, okay, how do we actually deal with sadness? How do we actually deal with the existential realities of being a human who is aware of ourselves enough to know we're going to die, but not aware of ourselves enough to know what happens after death? That's existential. How do we deal with the fact that we live on a planet that we don't have perfect control over, and we can be in pain and suffering in ways that we can't fix at any moment? That's scary. Real spirituality should be giving us tools to work with that, because nothing is going to take that away. Look at what you believed about your caregivers and reality in your childhood, and look for how that might be being mirrored in your spirituality. Look for where you might be being gaslit into believing that heaven exists on this planet if you just do the right things, and that your pain is because of you. Start to question that. Look for the people who are telling you that transcendence is possible, and realize that they are saying it for themselves, they're not saying it for you. And then start to look for the tools and the people out there who are teaching you how to process your trauma, how to process your sadness, how to be with problem solving where that exists, and then support where it doesn't. Look for spirituality that's grounded in reality, which is that reality is not human-centric and we don't have complete control. So what can we control, and what do we need to learn to process? And it should lead to a place where we have more compassion for everybody. It should lead to a place where we are looking to make systems better and better and better for all of us, instead of denying that people can be victimized. It means that we want to start to shift power imbalances. It means that we want to start to address where things are just shitty and how we can make them better. It means that we become empowered to look for where we can make change. And we become empowered to say, okay, I'm going to learn how to be with my anger, and how to be with my sadness, and how to be with my grief, instead of trying to transcend it or escape it or get rid of it. I'm going to learn to be with my existential crises and realize that they come through, and then I move on. I'm going to stop blaming myself for all of my pain and trying to fix myself whenever I'm in pain. And I'm going to ask the question, what do I need to support myself right now? Instead of how do I fix myself right now? That to me is true spirituality. Being told that perfection is possible if you just perfect yourself is a childhood trauma response. It is not spirituality. Okay? So, check out the Mystery School if you like stuff like this. Check out my YouTube channel. I've got tons of free content out there for dealing with emotions and embracing parts of yourself you don't like and all that stuff. Just go through my stuff. You'll find lots of tools. But if the transcendent model isn't working for you, this is my alternative. Okay? So, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Internet, for cooperating. And I will see you when I see you.